One of my first releases I did was assisting the That's the Spirit campaign, which was, again, that was dealing with a major label, which was my first time of having any experience with that.
Which were the bands then that you sort of cut your teeth on with sort of getting involved for the first time and learning these things?
I'd say While She Sleeps were a big one for me. We did a campaign with them. We did the URW campaign in 2017. And there's no label on that. It was just us and the band. That was a really sort of eye-opening experience on how the world of marketing an album actually worked. There was a whole set of problems there that you kind of, you're almost shielded to as a manager when you have a label to deal with them. I mean, I remember putting stock in the back of my car and delivering it to HMV on chart day because it was, HMV in Birmingham needed some extra records or whatever it was. That workload was so massive that was kind of where I really sort of had one half or half a step in the door of kind of becoming manager, because that was such a mammoth job.
Niall, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, mate. Cheers.
I think the place to just start with was how you got into the music industry.
Yeah, I mean, how far do you want me to go back? So I'm from a little town called Stevenage in Hertfordshire, which is not exactly rich in alternative music history.
Right.
However, there was one venue there called Bowes Centre, and they, as a venue, they have a pedigree of artists like Social Distortion and the Cranberries and the Who have all played there. So that kind of turned into our place of congregating for skating and music and things like that. So as we're kind of going through all of our alternative music upbringing, that was kind of like the place where we were. So kind of growing up around that, everything, it's all great to be involved. Noticed that they were putting on shows as part of like a youth project. So they would get bands in the local area. The teenagers would be promoting the shows, doing everything from running front of house, lights, all of that kind of stuff. So that was kind of my first inkling of there's life in this industry outside of being in a band. So that was kind of where it started to get stuck in and sort of really get an idea of like how to what this is all about and what do I want to do. Went on to university, did a music technology degree, was a terrible student, absolutely awful, but young guy in his early 20s, thought he knew better and was complete, just a rubbish student.
Yeah, I was the same.
And as part of that course, we did a music business module. There was a placement on it, which I went and found and landed at PRS for Music, music licensing and royalties. So that was, cool, interesting. And then somewhere along the way, got told about a company called UPRAWR Management via this business module. Thought, great, I'll go and check it out. And then saw online we need an intern in October 2013. So that's kind of where we landed, where we are.
That's wild then, that you actually started off as a fucking intern.
Yeah.
And now manage one of the biggest bands. Like, that's fucking cool in its own right.
Yeah, I mean, it's it definitely snowballed. I think we can say that. Kind of it fell upwards, I guess. It was kind of it was I always wanted to be in the alternative and heavy music space, so that was kind of a very clear thing when I was younger, like whether that's in a band or doing something off stage or being in the studios, like that's always what I wanted to do. So to kind of land where I landed was, there's such a great environment to kind of learn and thrive in. So yeah, very happy to still be there.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. So when you started then as an intern, was that your first thing of being like, I want to be a manager? Or was it just, I want to work in music and this is available?
Starting out as an intern there, it was kind of, I knew I wanted to do something in this space. Wasn't quite sure where, how it was going to fit. The role sort of evolved from like all the day-to-day admin stuff, all the posts and everything like that, into kind of, getting to meet the bands and getting involved with the managers and things like that. And then I think it just clicked one day. I think it was like, this is definitely a home and somewhere that, I think that I can get first-hand experience on the industry and how things really work, and you take a look under the hood and see all the nuts and bolts and all that kind of stuff.
So how long was that internship then, and what was it a process actually getting a job there afterwards? Did you literally just stay the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, there was never a kind of laid out process. I think it was like something like November to June, and then they kind of rolled me into an assistant contract off the back of that. I think it was just, I think I just got close to a lot of the managers there, got close to a lot of the bands. I think they kind of made a decision about halfway through that like, we'd like to kind of keep you around. which I'm obviously very grateful for. Stuck around like a bad smell. But yeah, it kind of just, it was quite a natural process. And yeah, I think the decision was made kind of around halfway through, thankfully. But
Has the role changed a lot then from that first day as a actual employee?
yeah, so I guess the company sort of structure on how things work, it was, and I think there's again, this is credit to the company because they've done this for long before I was even there, and still kind of doing it now, where it's, they go through the intern process, and you kind of see, the ones that work, and maybe the ones that don't, or they want to go off and do other things. That if it evolves into an assistant level role, which again is great because, I got to work with the best part of half of the roster over there for 3 years. So that's, all the stuff from Broco to While She Sleeps to Bring Me, all of these great bands, and gives you a really good pedigree. And then that kind of evolves into a manager in your own right. You start to build up your own roster, kind of take a little bit more ownership and lead a few of the projects. And then I went into a senior artist manager where it's, there's your own team on a day-to-day level that work with me now across all of all the bands that I do, Bullet and Capici and the rest.
Were you the first intern that's done that?
No, I think there was a couple before me who also kind of got to that senior artist manager level. I'm probably the one that's been there the longest, for better or worse. No,
So all the new interns look at you and think, in 10 years, that's the guy I'm going to be.
I definitely don't know about that. I think it's kind of, I think everybody kind of has their own path, and everybody kind of attacks the job a little bit differently, and they end up in a space that's comfortable for them. But that was kind of, that was what worked for me, and I was just quite happy to get stuck in and say yes to every opportunity, which I think is so key and something that you really do have to do to survive in the industry, to be honest.
How long did it take for you to go to that senior management level?
So I was an assistant for 3 years, 2013 to 2017. They made me a manager in 2018, and the role then changed into senior manager around 2020. So yeah, it was quite a, again, natural sort of progression, around 7 years to get to where I am.
Who's making the decisions on that? Because you've got obviously the senior members of the team, but the band, I presume, have to agree that they want you in that position.
I mean, I think you find out very quickly if they don't, is probably the better way to explain that. No, so I mean, look, the role of manager is you get stuck in, and you're in everything that they do across the board, and that's personal relationships, and as well as finances and all the business deals and things like that. So you do have a special bond with your artist, and that you'll sink or swim by that bond, basically, and however long you want to last. But so the bands, you have that relationship with the band. In terms of the company, so UPRAWR Power has a board of directors. Craig Jennings, who you obviously know, and is a great friend to the pod and the charity. And Matt Ash, who's our VP in the US, and Don Jenkins, who's our commercial director. So they kind of make the company level business decisions on how things are run and who's best placed doing what, and then the senior managers kind of do the running of the artist business effectively.
Yeah. So what's the sort of difference in the day-to-day between being a managing assistant, a manager?
So between an assistant and a manager? Yeah. So I mean, the assistant kind of, you're there to quarterback the manager, and a lot of that is, there's a lot of admin that comes with the role. I won't sugarcoat it. It's, there's a lot of calendars, a lot of, sort of day-to-day running of artists' personal lives. I like to kind of involve everybody as heavily as possible, and that's kind of, bringing everybody into the creative meetings and watching how the decisions are made and how the deals are structured and everything else, because that's the best place to learn, and that's kind of, that's how I learned to do it. And then the managers and the senior managers, it's kind of, you're strategizing everything from the touring schedule to worldwide release campaigns on records, and kind of, the big picture sort of stuff that comes with marketing a band and kind of propelling it forward. So yeah, it's, assistants, you do get stuck in all of those things, but you're obviously, you have that layer of protection, and the senior managers are the ones kind of making the decisions.
If you're the senior manager, do your managers underneath you report to different senior managers? Does that ever?
So Yeah, that can be the case. I mean, we're lucky enough to have like a wide pool of resources at Raw Power, and we have a great digital team there as well as all our assistants and everybody else. And sometimes there is a crossover. I mean, I was working for 2 managers at one point as an assistant, which again I loved, because the more fun shit you get to work on, the better, right? So not always. Sometimes there's, if there's a dedicated assistant to a dedicated manager, I think we've always kind of found that the crossover works, because I think that is just the best place for people to learn.
I didn't realize that you literally, like, it's blown my mind that like, just knowing now the scale of like being in charge of Bullet.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely from the ground up, right? So, and again, like the company, there's not really been a better place to learn the ins and outs of the industry. Because when I started, I was green. It was, I came off the back of a music technology course with like minimal business experience. Like I'd been in bands and kind of had a rough idea on how the industry worked, but there was no, I'd never seen a proper record contract, or never, the world of publishing was this complete alien thing to me. So to learn on the job, I think is, probably putting it lightly.
Do you really have to learn every aspect of it in order to progress?
I mean, look, to get anywhere in the industry to a certain extent, like you do need that industry knowledge. And that is kind of something that you can go into a role with a very basic understanding of it, and the rest you will learn on the job. I mean, I kind of say, look, that there's multiple levels to the job, and the industry knowledge is very important. I think your management of people is probably equally important, and I think you kind of really should be throwing yourself around as many unique people in unique roles to get a skill set to deal with people on a day-to-day level. So yeah, it is important, but I think there's other things that you can also focus on to kind of make yourself invaluable in the meantime. And there's a lot of admin as well, right? So there's a lot of admin in the entry-level jobs, and I think just being organized is also like a really underrated quality that you can, again, sink or swim in a job just depending on how much you've got your shit together, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, that makes such a big difference to a company, because I mean, I see that all the time with the charity and with our business, because I'm the most unorganized fucker on the planet, man. Like, just for me to take a Zoom call, I need like 15 alarms on my phone, because I'm just going to miss everything I do. But when we put somebody into a position that is just naturally organized and really good at it, it just changes everything.
And I mean, if you're lucky enough at assistant level, you ever get put in a process of filing for US visas, which is fucking frightening. It's, that's where you need to kind of have your head in the game, and I think,
So what are the most difficult parts then?
What of the job as a whole?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, there's different skill sets for different aspects of kind of what you're doing. I mean, again, like going back to the visa thing, that can be like super challenging, and then because a lot of it's out of your hands, and that's a high stress environment when you're dealing with artist logistics on a sort of day-to-day level like that. I think, there's never a right answer in terms of a lot of what we do. And I think when you're trying to market a band and market a record, I think it's kind of, you'll set up and do a planning meeting, and a lot of the time you're drawing on a wealth of experience that you already have, but sometimes your guess is as good as anybody's, and there really is no blueprint on a lot of the time. You can kind of take what's worked before you, but that's always trying to find a winning formula for those kind of things is that can be difficult.
Are there any campaigns then that you've worked on where you really thought it was going to work and it's just been bombing and you've had to turn it around?
I wouldn't say bombing. I think it's kind of, you make decisions, you kind of make calculated decisions on everything that you do. But I think, there's been certain aspects of album campaigns where, you've been so certain that single choices are right for radio, for instance, and you just don't get any bites. And then that's kind of like the real head in hands moment when you were like, fuck, I really thought they were going to go for this and they didn't. It's kind of little things like that. I think, you're always kind of, and you're always flexible, and you're always kind of, you if something needs changing halfway through and you think, okay, no, they haven't gone for this single, we'll switch it out, we'll go for something else on the next one. Or, maybe this tour isn't right to do it this time, let's punt it 6 months and then we'll switch things around. I think that's kind of, that's where you do draw from that experience, and you kind of, you adapt to what situation you're in. But yeah, I don't know about outright bombs.
Which were the bands then that you sort of cut your teeth on with sort of getting involved for the first time and learning these things?
I'd say While She Sleeps were a big one for me. Obviously, great set of guys, and I know you've had them on the pod, and they're self-managed now, which is fantastic for them. But that was kind of we did a campaign with them. We did the UPRAWR campaign in 2017. and there's no label on that. It was, it was just us and the band. They did a pledge music campaign, which kind of, how they sort of ran their pre-orders and push the album sales from there. That was a really sort of eye-opening experience on how the world of marketing an album actually works.
Was that wildly different because of the lack of a record label?
Yeah, there was a whole set of problems there that you kind of, you're almost shielded to as a manager when you have a label to deal with them. I mean, I remember putting stock in the back of my car and delivering it to H&V on chart day because it was, H&V in Birmingham needed some extra records or whatever it was. And that was just like, okay, this is, kind of, I know what to do here in the future. Do you know what I mean? That was a kind of really key one in terms of my personal growth.
Was that you a manager level or assistant?
So I was assisting on them kind of at the point where that workload was so massive that was kind of where I really sort of had one half or half a step in the door of kind of becoming manager, because that was such a mammoth job that it needed kind of multiple people working on it. And the band, by the way, you can't run a campaign like that without a band like that getting stuck in on a day-to-day level as much as they do, and it doesn't work for anybody. And they were the hardest workers of all on it. But yeah, that was a really interesting one. I mean, there's been others as well. Like, it was kind of one of my first releases I did. I was assisting in a kind of a very sort of minor role on it, but working the That's the Spirit campaign, which was, again, that was dealing with a major label, which was my first time of having any experience with that. So just to kind of get a little bite-sized nugget of information on how that works, that was really, really key. But yeah,
how many people are part of the team then that's working on that? That's the Spirit was a pretty big deal at the time.
Yeah,
that was.
There's a lot. I mean, different labels obviously work in different ways, but when you've got a band kind of sitting at that head of the table like they are, that's kind of there's multiple in marketing. You're talking I'm trying to recall back and give you an exact number, but it's really difficult to do. Honestly, there's probably double, triple what you would experience on a normal kind of indie record label, to be honest. I think that really, you are at the point where it becomes its own beast.
Does it make a massive difference to you then? Obviously it had to have with the Sleeps album because there wasn't a label, but if the band is really personally involved in the business side of it and they're not just saying it's your problem, I'm an artist.
Yeah, I mean, it only works if that's the case. I think that's kind of those campaigns where you're so one-to-one with the fans. If the band doesn't want to do the work or doesn't want to put the time in, then it will flop. They were very kind of heavily involved from the off. A lot of the creative decisions were joint decisions with them. They knew exactly what they wanted. They had a really clear vision of how they wanted to run everything. So that did make the job easier. I mean, if we had to kind of, drag that side of things along a little bit as well, then I think it wouldn't have been the same. So yeah, credit to them. I mean, that really wouldn't have worked with 9 out of 10 of other bands.
Does it make it easier when the band's got one sort of obvious leader?
Yes and no. I think it's there's pros and cons to both, right? Because sometimes you can have two really key people in a band who are pulling in different directions, and it's your job as manager to kind of not broker a peace deal, but you kind of like, we need to kind of get a little bit more concise here, guys, and figure out what it is you want to do. It depends on the band as well, and it depends how involved the people are. I mean, if you've got one guy kind of making, not making all the decisions, but one guy who's the voice of the band, and that it's a uniform voice, then that it can be great. If you've got to make one phone call versus 4, then yeah, brilliant. But yeah, there's no sort of preference from me, to be honest. Sometimes I'm like, the more opinions in the band, the better, because I think it makes for a great discussion, and it makes sure that everybody's heard. There's nothing worse than coming away from a planning meeting and having to make a different phone call and go, oh, I didn't really agree with that, or something kind of doesn't feel right. But that's fine. That's how it works. It's people's lives, and it's people's creativity that you deal with. So that comes with its own set of problems.
Were there any other sort of moments or things that you're involved in where there was sort of like a click for you, where you were like, fuck, now I get this, how this works?
I genuinely do think every record that you put out and every artist that you work with, you do kind of grow more confident and go from strength to strength. And I think that's kind of, again, I say it, but you're constantly drawing from your experience on how you've, kind of done things in the past, and how, what's applicable now, how can I make this go smoothly? Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of one thing. I kind of picked that one out because that was a sort of a very unique situation, and that's not something that we've had to deal with since. But it's kind of, again, given us a greater understanding of how the label side of things work. But yeah, I think it's just a case of the more opportunities you have to work with great bands doing great, really good shit, then I think that's kind of that's how you just put one foot in front of the other and really kind of grow, to be honest.
How did you grow then to working with Bullet and actually being the senior manager for them specifically?
So for them specifically, so I assisted on them in 2016. Did that for a year, had a really great relationship with the guys. I then kind of made that transitional period into becoming a manager in my own right. And then a couple of years later, their manager who was doing it left, went to go off and start on his own. Obviously, all very amicable, shake hands and walk away kind of thing. And I think they knew that, I had a relationship with the band. I was probably the best candidate to come in and do it. And it was, it just all sort of felt right and made sense. And that was 2018. So 6 years on, here we are.
Were you working with other bands at the same time?
Yeah, so I just developed my own roster. I was doing Banquet Shapes at the time. I was doing Boston Manor at the time. And there was a couple of other bands who are no longer on Raw Power. But yeah, so it was, it was kind of, you look at it and go, it's a big job. But obviously I bit the hand off for it, and yeah, I think you'd be stupid to say no, wouldn't you?
Of course, man. I mean, so when you took that senior management role for them, does that mean you stopped working with the other bands, or?
No, not necessarily. I think each project kind of you look at in isolation. I think yeah, I've done other bands while working Bullet. Some, it's been a case of it hasn't quite worked, or again that they've decided to go off and kind of be self-managed. All sorts of different situations. You definitely have to look at your roster and how you're managing your time more carefully. There's been certain things where I've had to turn around and say I can't wholly dedicate all of my time that is required to this, and somebody else has come in and maybe picked it up, which again is the benefit of having such a good pool of resources to be able to do that. But yeah, it's not to say that I can't, I work with other bands now. It's just a case of managing your time effectively and making sure that you can give everything that you can to each artist.
How does it work financially with your time then? Because I'm guessing it's not just like it's a 40-hour week and at 5 o'clock you stop.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, fucking hell, I wish. Yeah, no, it's it is it's a I don't want to say 24/7. That's completely over dramatic, but it is. You work stupid hours sometimes, and you're dealing with people across the globe from Australia to North America, and so that means late night planning meetings, early morning planning meetings. If you're up in the middle of the night, if somebody's bus gets broken to in Spain or wherever it is, then that's kind of that. It's it comes with the job, doesn't it?
Whose bus got broken into in Spain?
I mean, there's been a few. I mean, I've had not broken into, but I've had, we can't get out of the car park at 1 a.m. with some bands, and I think there was an incident with I'm trying to remember actually. This isn't a fob off. I actually genuinely can't remember who it is. But I mean, it happens all the time. Regrettably, it's like bands get gear stolen on the road, or something happens, or there's a medical emergency and all of that kind of stuff, and you're quite often the first people that they call. For better or worse, if somebody calls you up and says I've broken my arm, it's like, call a doctor. No, I mean, it's you obviously need to know for whatever the implications are. If you've got to cancel a show or dig out insurance, all of that kind of stuff, like you need to be first line of defense basically.
So is it just a case of there are no set hours and it's just get the
the work gets done when it gets done. And I've said that phrase a few times to my wife, and she loves me for it, as you can imagine. But yeah, it's just tours, don't stop at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, do they? Or things happen, things have to get done, and that's what kind of comes with the job, right?
Do you have a lot of responsibility on tour or with the tour?
Yeah, I mean, with the tour, you're heavily involved in the setting up, all the logistics, kind of all the marketing, all the kind of stuff that comes with the advanced prep on the tour. Again, I like being around my acts when they go on tour. I like kind of being there in case there is anything. I also just like seeing the show, for a bit of self gratification, if nothing else. You know what I mean? So it's nice to, it's nice to kind of be there for the high five moments as well. But we have great teams that deal with the band when they're on the road. We're lucky enough to work with an amazing pool of tour managers over the years, and great front of house guys, all the key people that make shit happen when you're not there. So yeah, you do sleep a bit easier at night knowing that they're in capable hands once they cross the border.
Yeah. What's the sort of day to day then with setting up a tour? How does that vary to when the band's not looking to tour or they don't have an album coming out?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting about the album because, we quite often put the two hand in hand. You put a record out, you want to go and play to people and market it, or the other way around. If there's a record coming, then you want to kind of, you want to get out there and play. I mean, we deal really closely with all of our agents in routing tours and routing the best rooms that work for us. I think, there's always conversation around when do you do your biggest rooms in the UK? When do you take the next step to go into the higher caps? When do you maybe take a minute and take a breath and see what the market is like, especially post-pandemic? That's been it's kind of turned it all into the Wild West a little bit, to be honest. I know we're still talking about it 4 or 5 years later, but there we are. So yeah, it's kind of, you deal with the setting up of the routing, all of the marketing. You work with the bands on art and running the ads, all of that kind of stuff. It's really is like, again, it sounds like a cop out, but you really are kind of doing everything.
Is it wildly different between an arena tour and a smaller, like 1,000 cap?
Yes and no. I mean, the roles stay the same, and kind of, you're just sort of doing it on different levels, and the logistics obviously is the biggest difference. I mean, I've got bands literally within the space of weeks doing 400 cap venue in Stoke and then the O2 Arena, so that obviously comes with a wildly different set of plans, but yeah, it's kind of the basis of the job is the same. Kind of you're doing the setting up, you're doing the marketing, you're making sure everyone can get on the bus and go, but it's there's obviously different problems that come with those different venues.
What sort of touring level? Because I think that's the easiest way for people to envision the sort of size of a band. But what venue size do you need to be playing before that band can be a full-time, like they don't have a day job and they can live off it?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I genuinely don't think there's a right or wrong answer for it, to be honest. I mean, look, the more tickets you're selling, the better financial position you're in, obviously. But some bands, and this kind of goes, this depends on genre to genre as well. I mean, in the hip hop space, there's, acts with millions and millions of monthly streams, but they'll quite often stay protected and just go and do a 500 cap show and sell it out quickly just to kind of get your foot off the ground. But with artists in our space, I think, obviously the more tickets you're selling, the better. I've seen bands go and do underplay tours and just sell them out incredibly quickly and, rinse the ticket sales there and do incredibly well off it. And equally, I've seen bands go into rooms at a roundhouse level, not sell it out, and then it's kind of, where do we go from here? So it really does depend. I don't think there's a kind of formula that it's like, okay, great, you've reached the forum level band now, that's kind of you sort of set for life. I think it all depends on, I mean, and also there's a strong argument where you're kind of only as good as your next record, which, for again, for better or worse, that's something to bear in mind. It's kind of, you can't just get to a certain level and then live off of that forever. It all depends on what's coming next.
Is that a stressful thing for you as a manager, thinking, if this next level tanks, then what am I doing with my job?
Not. It's probably not as stressful as it should be. I think when you put it like that, I think it's. You're working with artists because you love what they do, and I think there's no. I always say as a manager, the best kind of compliment I can have is when an artist goes into the studio and they just say, "Oh, we're so comfortable doing this record. Like, this is great." I'm like, "Brilliant! I've done my job. You just go and kind of make the album that you want to make." I've kind of very rarely had a record back and gone, "Oh God, this is going to be really kind of difficult." Do you know what I mean? I think that's probably me coming from a point of privilege of just working with the artists that we work with.
If that did come back and you were like, "I don't know how to break this to the band, but it's fucking shit.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean,
is it your responsibility to break it to the band?
yeah, I mean, there's you do have to get stuck in on the A&R, and I don't know about kind of going in and saying, oh, this fucking sucks, lads, we need to figure this out. I think it's more, like, if you don't think it will connect, and again, there's a wide range of kind of dimensions when you're looking at marketing a record, and you've got radio, streaming, how are the actual fans going to react to this on a day-to-day level. So there's a kind of few levels to the conversation. If your whole strategy is around marketing a record for Radio 1 or Radio 6, or you want to just really appease the fans on Spotify, then you kind of look at it from that angle. But yeah, I don't think, I mean, again, it's probably me just being incredibly lucky that I don't think I've ever worked a record where it's been inherently bad. I think it's, sometimes you might get songs back and go, oh, I think this could maybe do with a little bit of, tweaking, or do you guys want to go and do a co-writing session with somebody else? Like, there's subtle kind of things that you can do to make changes without ripping the Band-Aid off and, or just ripping somebody's heart out in front of, you know what I mean?
Having some tact. Talking about co-writes then, is that something that's actively sort of encouraged? Because to me on the outside, if you've got a writer that's obviously great at writing hits, why would a band not want to work with them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if actively encouraged is the word. I think it's kind of, if the artist is comfortable and up for kind of expanding, I guess, their horizons, then, that's always, I always like people to kind of just see what's out there and just see what's possible. Do you know what I mean? Like the amount of times, more often than not, you get a series of co-writes back and half of them won't make the record because, the band aren't feeling it or whatever, but just go and try, like just go and experiment and see what else you can do. Because, you can write the same record 3 times in a row and it'd be amazing. But if you can make subtle tweaks and kind of get it to the next level, then why would you not?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you're right. It kind of, maybe it is something that we do sort of subconsciously encourage, but I just say to bands, like, just go and experiment when you can, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
A lot of this conversation has mentioned how good the marketing is with UPRAWR. Why are they so good at marketing?
So I think as a company, again, I've kind of spoken about, I guess, our resources and everything that we do. I think we've been very good at kind of having our finger on the pulse in sort of current trends, especially in the digital space. I mean, we've always kind of taken pride in the fact that we've had a really good digital team that have been on the front foot of looking at what's out there at the minute. I mean, for instance, now there's obviously a massive emphasis on artists gathering and owning their own data. So that's kind of a constant topic of conversation, and we're always looking for new partners and new areas that we can expand in. And now I think it's just a case of, just really kind of seeing what is going on and what's out there, and that's something that we've always done really well. I think, yeah, we've always kind of been on the front foot with it. So yeah, I think it's just a case of we all, there's a group of managers and a group of staff that work really well together. We all kind of share thoughts and opinions, and that's the benefit of working for a company like that. It's the water cooler moments, right? It's like everybody kind of sitting around the office and just talking about each other's projects and comparing notes. I think that's been the kind of biggest benefit for me.
Is that a big part of what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have weekly meetings on various topics, talk about what's going on with all our acts and what's great, what isn't. We'll share ideas. It really is beneficial to kind of have that kind of net, if you like.
Does that translate to the US? Because obviously, like, doing well in the UK is one thing, but especially financially, breaking America's where the money comes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. And funny enough, I literally had a conversation with somebody the other day on how beneficial Warped Tour was for breaking British acts over here, because that was, playing to a massive amount of people over an entire summer. So yeah, it does translate. I mean, there's obviously key differences in marketing a band over there and versus over here, and obviously trying to break a British band over there, it is incredibly difficult. Financially being the main one. We've been very lucky over the years to work quite closely with the BPI. I mean, they do a music export and growth scheme, which kind of allows, artists to go and tour internationally and is, government funded, which has obviously been really good. But yeah, it is tough. And there are, a lot of it's the same. And if the music's good, the music's good, and you work it no matter what. But there are obviously key differences on how you approach it.
What sort of money does it take then if you're trying to break a band or you go into the BPI?
I mean, it depends on the tour. I mean, the kind of, I think the ballpark sort of sum, you're probably looking at 30 to 50 grand realistically for a startup. It's not, it's not easy for a month-long tour as well. It's incredibly difficult.
That's wild.
It's nuts, the visas, the transport, flights, all of the overheads that come with it. And it's only getting worse as well. It's just, it's definitely not getting any easier.
Is that money then almost impossible to recoup on that tour? And is it a complete sort of gamble for the future that...
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to recoup that kind of money off of one tour. It definitely is an investment, and you have to plot carefully. The amount of times we have conversations with bands about getting tour offers in and just saying it's not the right time. Like, we have to kind of sit this one out and wait, a few years before we're kind of, grow the business at home, and then when it's right, we'll put our foot on the gas and kind of get you over there. But
do they understand that, or do they think that you're just holding them back?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And more often than not, they do. And I think the finances speak for themselves. It's like, it's a numbers game, if anything else. Like, your cash flow has to you have to survive primarily. So that's the kind of the trump card that everybody tends to get. But yeah, it can be frustrating. And again, something like Warped Tour not happening, that was always ideal because it was such a good launch pad. And not even just from the playing side of things, I think bands connecting with other bands and other industry professionals, it's like, people make lifelong friendships off the back of those tours, which propel them in the future.
What are the aspects of the tour then where they make the money? Merch, especially, merch being the main thing, especially, I guess, if they're a support.
Yeah, I mean, merch is what's putting food on the table more often than not. Again, the more tickets you sell as a headline band, the better off you'll be. But merch is the key one for sure. Support tours. I've just, for example, just had Kick a Peachy out with Frank Carter in Europe, and it's a case of the band on the merch table doing meet and greets every night, because that's kind of and that's not they're not breaking the bank to do that tour, but to get the income, it's so important for bands to get stuck in and do that.
Is that really lucky then for this scene that merch is such a thing? Because you see people walking around in metal merch and like heavy band merch, but you don't see people walking around in a lot of other genres. Like,
yeah, I think alternative fashion has been a really kind of key thing over the years for a lot of our bands, and that's it's not to be understated that when bands are doing merch ranges, it's very much like what are people wearing, what are other bands doing, how can we kind of get something that's a little bit different that catches people's eyes. There's kind of almost a science behind it, to be honest, of how bands put those ranges together. But yeah, it definitely that, and I think alternative fashion has kind of been a big help in that sense.
Is there sort of like a percentage that you aim to hit? If it's like, we sell 10,000 tickets, that means we should sell X amount of units.
We normally look at it from an analysis point of view. We normally look at it per heads and kind of seeing, what's the average sort of, what's the demographic? How much do we think they're kind of spending on average per head? So that kind of gives you a right, because again, especially in Europe, when you're doing a tour out there and you're not carrying hundreds of t-shirts and you're doing drop ships, which are also insanely expensive, it's a case of, how do we manage stock levels? How do we get this all to work? So you do have to kind of dig in on the numbers and do a little bit of analysis and see what you're going to need.
If you don't have a head for numbers, are you fucked as a manager?
If you don't have a per head?
Like, it's just as a person, like
if you don't have a head for numbers, sorry. I mean, if you don't have a head for numbers, I don't think fucked. I think there's a layer to the job, which, and I said earlier about kind of being organized. I think that's kind of, that's insanely helpful to be good with numbers and tour budgets, everything else. I mean, when you're dealing with such fine margins for these support tours, I think you have to have a key grasp of the budget, for sure. It is something you can learn, but I think if you're great at maths and you're great at kind of data and things like that, then that's it's only going to benefit you for sure.
With the tour that you've got coming up with Bullet, which is an arena one, it's a co-headline, right?
Yeah.
So how does that vary then between just like your traditional headline?
So we looked at it from a perspective of, I mean, there was a few layers to kind of setting it up, and the initial idea came from Matt Tuck and Craig. I had a conversation, and there was an idea that came from that where Bullet and Trivium, key albums, anniversary, makes perfect sense. I think the business side of it is coming out of a pandemic where the market is probably quite oversaturated. It's, let's kind of give a 1 + 1 = 3 and get two great bands playing two great records for one ticket price. With that, there's, it's a double-edged sword, because you're getting two arena level bands for effectively the price of one, putting on 2 great shows. The other side of that is you've got 2 arena level bands wanting to put on arena level shows for half the money. So yeah, it's for the fans, it's great. I think logistically, it's kind of, you know, there's certain not even challenges, and again, the teams have actually been great to work with on that, and it's been a really, really easy process. But it's a case of, you know, you have to kind of figure out how this is all going to work in a different kind of way.
Are they having to compromise on what they usually do, or is it?
And I think we've been extremely. I could see how that would have to happen in some situations. I think we've been extremely lucky where it's been, you know, we've kind of got it to a place where it all works for everybody and everybody's happy. But
Is that because the bands have great relationships already?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I think everyone's kind of relatively been on the same page from day one. You know, all the 5B lot who do Trivium, they've been great. Trivium themselves are great guys, and it's been, you know, it's been really kind of, touch wood, really easy. But it's like, it's one of those things, because, you know, if you think you're setting up a tour of this size, and it's like you've got 8 bands, like 6 managers, 4 sets of agents, 2 TMs, 2 PMs. It's like, if somebody says too many cooks to me again, I'm going to put my head through a window. But yeah, no, it's been a really sort of eye-opening and interesting process.
Is that then just another learning experience for you, even though you're already at that level?
100%. So I actually had a thought the other day. I mean, you know, 10 years I've been in management, I've actually not had an artist play the O2, let alone do it in a headline capacity. So, yeah, it's definitely been another scenario where I've kind of learned on the job, you know, every day's a new day, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's been great.
What is the day-to-day then of setting that up? Because I've got the most minimal possible experience from setting up Thousand Lights, and even with that, it was full on.
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting about this tour is rolling UK straight into Europe, and you know, there's a lot of different venue sizes and configurations, and kind of how you're going to run the show and everything else. So you're kind of, you know, and this is a scenario here where, again, there's so many people involved that you do have to be across everything. So my inbox has never kind of gotten to the state that it's in now, as it has before. So it's like, you know, the dimensions of kind of the staging every night. It's like, you know, we're working with the tour managers again, who are great, but it's, you know, you've got buses for 2 different bands, you've got trucks for 2 different bands, who's carrying merch, what are we doing, you know, all this, that, and the other. So there's a lot of logistical conversations that happen around a tour of that size, some of which I've not dealt with before, but you know, again, it's been great to learn on the job.
How much does a bus cost?
It is a lot. I mean, you know, I'm not going to give you an exact number and call it, you know, that's what it is, but yeah, it's a lot of money. And you know, again, I don't want to keep mentioning it because I think it's incredibly boring and we've done it enough. But like post-pandemic, all of the costs around touring are just going up, and the band's fees are relatively staying the same. So it becomes incredibly hard to run tours of this size. And I'm not going to sit here and say boo-hoo, you know, poor us, you know what I mean? It's like the bands, you know, the bands are playing to thousands of people every night, which is great for them and great for the fans. But it is difficult when the cost of this stuff does go up, especially in Europe.
If it's really successful and it does gross a lot of money, is there a financial benefit to you as the manager?
We only earn off of what the bands earn. So it's, and you know, but the tour comes first always. You know, the tour and the bands always come first. So that's our rule number one. If the tour does well, great. If the tour kind of doesn't go well, then that's fine. We'll take a hit. That's totally all good. And you know, it has to. There's certain levels to that as well, where it has to look great for the fans. If there's, you know, if there's X amount being spent on production and that means everybody takes a bit of a hit, then we deal with that as well.
Is there a lot of pressure on you then at an arena level outside of that tour? Because there's going to be a lot of other stuff that the band needs to do to hold that sort of status.
Yes. I mean, we looked at that tour as a way to kind of, you know, how can we kind of push Bullet to the next level, I think was kind of the main thing. So there was a few decisions made on the business side where maybe slightly struggling environment will give the fans 2 arena level bands and try and keep it at 1 ticket price. Looking forward, it's, you know, we are doing a reissue of the Poison box set, which is 20 years, which is mental, by the way. That came out when I was midway through school. Incredibly important record for me. But then where do we kind of go from there? So, you know, we've got a 3 to 5 year plan on the band on what's going to happen next, and there's a lot of great shit to come. So we looked at that as a launch pad of kind of things to come.
Does that help you with job security, knowing that the band want to stick around and want to keep going? Because
again,
what would
great.
happen if the band just went, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great
Fuck pain in
question,
the
and I'd definitely have to find something else to do. No, it's it's a double-edged sword, because we always say you're putting plans in place which are 2, 3, 4 years in advance, and you wish your life away. But at the same time, it is what's happening, and what's coming in, and the same for the band. So yeah, I mean, it would free me up to go and try and find some other incredible new acts to work with, but it does help kind of having a solid 5-year plan effectively.
Yeah. How does Raw Power or management companies in general like work in America? If you've got your office in London, that's where you're based, and you've got to break things and do things in the States. What's the approach to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a team in the States, always had a foothold over there. So that's kind of, again, that's given us a great understanding of how that market works, and kind of, given us the benefit of, that knowledge to try and break a new band. It really varies on a case by case. I don't think we look at any one territory as like, oh, we need to break America, or, we have someone in Japan, Rue, as well, who's been a great asset for us, but we don't look at those territories of like, we aggressively need to kind of attack this. I think if it's great, it's great. And if it's, we've had acts come in where their business in America has gone level to what it is in the UK, and they've done really well side by side. Other bands, it could take 4 or 5 tours in the UK before they even get over to America. So I don't think, there are differences in what you do over there, but I don't think we've ever kind of looked at it as a different, as a country, as like a different approach. I think it's just, if the band's great, it's great. And when the time is right, the time's right.
There's bands that we've heard of where they've got an American manager and a UK manager.
Yeah, I mean, that can, so again, we're lucky to have a team over there, and Matt Ash, who's the VP of Raw Power, he's effectively across a lot of the business in America. I think when you're a UK band, I think having your main kind of, your main manager in the UK or on the same time zone is always great.
Yeah.
But we do have a great American roster, Mars Volta and Of Mice and Men, and various other acts who, when they're over here, we'll kind of take care of them, and we're all around it, so it's kind of reciprocated. But I can see the benefit for sure if you're an act where your business is as big in America or as big in Asia or somewhere like that. Having we like to try and spread ourselves out. Again, having somebody in Japan is a massive help, that when we have acts over there, they can kind of help them navigate a little bit. And the same for America.
When you're looking at taking on a new band, or the company's taking on a new band, what are the sort of minimum requirements that you're looking for? Is it important that they've got any sort of tier?
It's so interesting, and I had the best part of an hour talking about this in with the team yesterday, and because we always say, does it need an agent, or does it need to have people sniffing around it, or what's the criteria? I think the short answer is there probably isn't one. I think if you get sent something and you have that passion and that instinct for it, and it's brand new, then I think you kind of you should pick it up and run with it. That's how I've always looked at it. And sometimes you get sent stuff where you're like, oh, I'm not really sure if this is right, but equally there's 4 or 5 labels sniffing around it already. You think maybe I'm missing something here. Let's kind of give it a listen and go through. So ideally a band comes in and like, yeah, we've got this really great agent, we're just out of a deal, and we're worth 2,000 tickets in London. You think, yeah, fucking brilliant, let's go. But it's it doesn't always happen that way, and we've always taken pride in developing acts and picking stuff up from the ground. So yeah, I don't think there's a set of rules. I think every manager is kind of different. We love sharing stuff around the office, and also I really like just to help connecting people as well. The amount of times that I get acts come through and might say this isn't right for me, but I know an agent who would fucking love this, and sharing stuff across and trying to get the ball rolling. I think it's great.
Is there then a level of security sort of for you with the company, knowing that if a band came and you just thought they were great and no one else, they didn't have anything else around them, you've got the sort of influence and power to So reach out to people and be like, you need to listen to this, and they will.
Yeah, it does that, that does help. And that comes with, working with as many people as you do over the years, and, working with the hundreds of people at labels and PRs and agents and things like that. I think, having good ears in this industry is a great thing. And having people you kind of trust to share good shit is also a good thing. So, yeah, I think that's definitely been a benefit for sure.
If there was one moment in your career that you could go back to or relive, what would it be?
No. The bullet headline of the download pilot, that was great. I think coming out of COVID and kind of everyone, a lot of people's sort of first festival experience back, that was really great. And that was a kind of a really good feel good moment for the guys, and a great high five moment. And again, a lot of work to put something like that into play, but yeah, that was special for sure.
Was there a moment you were a bit younger and you were just like, fuck, can't believe my luck here?
I mean, yeah,
like you realized the future was exciting.
Yeah, I think kind of when I first got employed at the company, and I kind of at that point I'd had an understanding of what it was all about, and I knew the team, and I knew a lot of the artists because I'd been there for 8 months or whatever it was. I think that was kind of a like, fuck yeah, everything's gonna be fine. Do you know what I mean? But it's quite cheesy, but I still have that moment occasionally, when you go to the big London show or you see the big festival, you think, fuck, I can't believe, you get to do this for a living.
It's good to still have that moment, man. It's funny when I ask this question, because people either directly go to something where they were like, this was amazing, I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Or they go to, fuck this up.
Yeah.
And I'd correct that shit if I could.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, there's been a few of those. There's been a few close calls. I mean, again, I referenced the visas, but fucking hell, it's probably the most stressful thing that you do. And yeah, it's like, that's, there's been a few close shaves over the years for sure.
Is there anything then before we sort of finish up that you'd like to finish on, or any advice you'd like to give somebody that was wanted to get into management?
I guess it's just to kind of recap really on what we said already. I think, to getting into management, and this is partly a letter to my younger self, I suppose, is that, the industry knowledge is obviously incredibly important, and you need a basic value of that, but you should definitely make sure to surround yourself with as many different people doing as many different roles as you can. I think just stay well connected, because I think your management of people will quite often carry you through this job. And even 10 years in, there's still scenarios and still different characters that you meet on a day-to-day level that's completely brand new. And again, we said it before, but I think just do the easy stuff really well. I think the amount of like entry level admin and stuff that needs to happen, just get organized, just double down on that. And I think you kind of make yourself invaluable, and it's a really underrated trait to have in the industry, I think. So yeah,
I think that's a really important takeaway for anyone that's watching, because I think actually saying it like that, do the easy stuff well, pretty good way of putting it, because you see a lot of people doing the easy stuff shit because they don't want to do it, and there's just no progression if you won't actually do that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Cool, man. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome having you. Is there anything you want to promote before we finish?
Anything I want to promote? God, I mean, it's just kind of the obvious, really. But at my Valentine, Trivium, UK, Europe next year, US, it's going to be great. But yeah, cool, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, dude. Thank you for listening. If you want to watch us, we're on YouTube. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll catch you again soon. Thanks, guys.